All right, we are live. Hi, Carlos.
Hi there.
How are you? Good morning.
Good morning to everybody. Good morning. Sunny
Yep,
California in here. And how's Georgia?
it's good. We had some rain last night, or actually early this morning. I wasn't sure if we were gonna flood because it was coming down really hard, but I guess we're fine here. Got the leak fixed, so my apartment doesn't leak anymore when it rains. So I'm happy about that. Thank you to everyone who's joining us this morning. If you're on the West Coast, it's morning. If you're on the East Coast, it's afternoon. And if you're in between, well, it's somewhere in between morning and afternoon. Well, we have a really great show for you today. This is really the anniversary of the Occupy Wall Street movement. So we're going to spend most of the hour reflecting on what the movement was about and what effects it's had on us in the 10 years since Occupy happened. So why don't we get started with the show? I'm Margot Pies. I'm your co-host. I'm a scientist, engineer, and occasional journalist. And over here, that's Carlos Marroquin. He is an amazing grassroots organizer in Los Angeles. And our show airs on Facebook, on the Bernie Sanders Brigade page, and also on YouTube simultaneously at Insight Out News. So please share us with your friends, your family members, anyone you think who could benefit from watching this show. And I think I maybe forgot to say what the title of the show is. You're watching Stand Up Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. So please hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, and share us. But more importantly, tune in and watch our show every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. So Carlos, hi. It's Occupy, 10 years later.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you may be watching us from. I have a little cold, so I do apologize that I may be taking a little, a harder time to talk, just expressing myself. But I do have asthma. I have my inhaler with me. You know, I'm one of those fortunate people that are able to get medication, but do struggle with my asthma from time to time, and this is one of those times. But I'm here, and I am excited to be able to participate this morning with my co-host Margaret, and we have history when it comes to Occupy. That's where I actually met Margaret, and we run the streets together. We did a lot of stuff together. We're gonna talk about some of that work that was done during the Occupy movement, the effects it created to the uh, uh, social justice movement, and many, many more things. But it is the anniversary of Occupy Wall Street, and here in Los Angeles, we people began to mobilize a few days later after the initial occupation in New York. But there's a lot to talk about because the implications of Occupy I still felt today. You know, we have seen a pretty much transitioning from movement to movement as goes back to decades back. It's not something that all of a sudden Occupy started and social justice movement started. It had been happening for decades before. So it's important for us to note that. And there's going to continue new movements. We're going to see the rise of different issues from time to time, including right now, the most powerful movement will be climate change. We saw,
Right.
even last year, we saw the Black Lives Matter movement rising up and the effects that it brought to people's lives. So
Yeah,
this is a movement.
Yeah, and Carlos, before we get too deep into Occupy, why don't we just touch on one of the major news stories of the week, which has to do with what is happening at the border right now, especially on the border of Mexico and the United States in Texas. with thousands of migrants coming in from Haiti, and many of them are living in tents along the border. I think in Del Rio, Texas, and it sounds like the Biden administration is accelerating deportations of these particular migrants. Tell us a little bit more about what you know, Carlos.
Well, we know that we have thousands of people at the border, uh, literally living in very dangerous conditions under a bridge. And today there was news. I was monitoring the news that the Biden administration has ordered a lot of those people to be deported. So this is a developing story. We know that there's, as for the past few months, there has been many people from Haiti that have made their way to the border. Many of them coming from different countries. If we go back to what happened in Haiti, it goes back to years back. The extreme poverty that exists there. We saw the abuse of government, all that aid that was supposed to have gone to them during the earthquakes. They never received the aid. The government, abused that, and the different foundations, including the Clinton Foundation, that received a lot of money and never, put it out there to where it was supposed to go. So people have flee the country looking for to be able to just survive. Many of them fled to different countries, including Central America, Mexico, and now they make their way to the border. And again, it's a matter of survival for them, but it is also a crisis that has developed now at the border. And the response by the Biden administration is to pretty much deport them. So this is going to be another black eye into the Biden administration for mishandling the crisis at the border. Because again, we were quick to judge Donald Trump handling the border, but pretty much Biden is doing the same thing. And we got to call it for what it is. We need to understand that there are reasons why the people are seeking refuge in the United States, one of the main reasons is people are escaping violence and extreme poverty. It's a matter of survival for them. And if we don't have policies, foreign policies that help those people out there, we are going to continue to see this happening, especially with climate change. People are
Right.
countries.
Carlos, so I've talked with this a little bit with some people in the past. Democrats, maybe a little more centrist, or Biden defending Democrats. And one of the arguments that I got was like, well, what's Biden and supposed to do about it? What are we supposed to do with all these people? So I want to know what your response is to comments like that when we say, like, Biden is deporting people who are coming here, and they say, well, what are we supposed to do with them?
Well, the question should be starting, why are they coming here? When we have policies that continue to hurt those that are poor already, poor countries, when we have governments in those countries that are not being held accountable for the money that they are receiving from the United States, all that aid that usually goes to the pockets of the government and their families, and not to the people where it's meant to go. These are the reasons why we are seeing these kind of movements, large movements of people migrating to other countries. Is the abuse of power? Is that bad foreign policies that are not doing what are intended to do? We have to be able to look back and see where are we failing. It is not the people's fault for trying to survive. How can we put the blame on them? And that's what's happening from both parties.
Mhm.
Neither party is clean, have clean hands on this. Both parties have failed when it comes to immigration, when it comes to foreign policy. We have created conditions in other countries that are hurting the people, that are pushing people from poverty to extreme poverty, and some beyond that. People are literally living on nothing. What are they supposed to do? And we pride ourselves in being the beacon of hope. When we close those doors to the people that are seeking refuge, how can we call ourselves a Christian nation? How can we call ourselves a beacon of hope? How can we call ourselves a leader of the modernized world? We are not.
Yep. I agree. So for that, we deserve a bad Biden. I didn't think I forgot about that one. Bad Biden, because this is not acceptable. These people need our help. And not only that, I mean, the United States played a role in destabilizing Haiti. In the early 20th century, like around 1913 or so, the United States occupied Haiti. And, what is the reason for it? I mean, it was racism. Right? Haiti was a slave colony. And these were Black people who rose up and took back their land, the country, and declared independence from Europeans, from being enslaved. And so historically, all of this motivation, all of the trauma that Haiti has felt has been because of that legacy. And the United States is obviously complicit in it, and we owe the Haitian people reparations in that regard. So, any last thoughts? Any final thoughts on this, Carlos, before we move on to talking about Occupy?
I think that this is going to come back to haunt the Biden administration. They gotta do better than that. They gotta look at the human side of this, the conditions that these people are in. Throwing them back to Haiti, deporting them, is not solving anything. It's solving something momentarily, at the border by pretty much putting into play the out of sight, out of mind type of policy. That is not solving. That's not leadership. We need better from President Biden. And right now, he's taking the easy way out.
Right. Thank you, Carlos. Well, now on to the exciting stuff. Talking about Occupy LA, Occupy Wall Street. I have a number of clips that I want to share with our audience today, and I think Carlos is going to do a little bit of social media sharing of the show right now. So while he's doing that, I want to show a clip of the first time that Carlos and I met at Occupy LA. And so a little backstory, I decided to do reporting on Occupy LA. I was very naive. I had no idea what I was doing. I had camera equipment and a microphone from some filmmaking stuff that I had been playing around with. And I wanted to make an impact on the Occupy movement, but I didn't want to be a protester so much because I felt that there were plenty of people to play that role. And I saw that there was something missing in the narrative in the media and cable news. A lot of it was very biased. They were, showing the protests in a negative light. And I wanted to really go there and be as objective as possible. So I was there for every single day of Occupy LA. I showed up every morning and, like 8:30, 9 a.m. I spent my whole day there. I would come home like 9 p.m. and I would cut up all of my videos, and I did everything by myself, and then I post them on YouTube. So that's what I did for about 55 days of the occupation. And then I did after that, after the eviction, I also covered a lot of Carlos's Occupy foreclosure events, and I covered the NATO protest in 2012. So on day 14 is when I first met Carlos. So this was only my second week out there. So before I embarrass Carlos, I'm going to embarrass myself because I didn't, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing, and there wasn't always a lot going on at Occupy at the time. So let me go ahead and start the clip, and hopefully everyone can hear this. And
Charles and David Coe, yeah, Boehner and Obama too. Oh, don't let leaders lead us astray. Stand up, speak out, seize the day. Take it to the street now. Start it with a tweet. Get up on your feet now. Occupy Wall Street. People, yeah, people. So this is all the people, by the people, for the people, we the people. Put on your medicine, yeah, take it to the street now. Start it with a tweet. Get up on your feet now. Occupy Wall Street.
Not a whole lot going on this afternoon at City Hall.
So not a lot going on that day, but I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward to when I actually interviewed Carlos. So let me go ahead and find that for you now. That I believe is at 4:04. All right.
Carlos, so you marched over here to the Superior Court where they presented papers today to the judges to start an investigation of some of the judges who are receiving money from banks and also presiding on cases that relate to foreclosures or anything with banks and home loans. How does that relate to you, and what is your involvement with Occupy Los Angeles?
Yes, I represent victimized homeowners.
Homeowners that have been victimized by banking institutions, financial institutions where they have literally stolen people's homes. I've been fighting this for the past 5 years, and we have well-documented information, and even within the court system where clearly the homeowners have been victimized by not only the banks, but also by the judges, by the court system, where they illegally have thrown people out of their homes.
And what's your relationship with Occupy LA?
Well, I'm joining Occupy LA. I am occupying because again, this is a way that we can voice our hurts, our opinions, and again, our demands against a system that has failed us.
And you were saying that you and other homeowners are going to be hunting out tonight?
Yes, we are formally joining the Occupy LA. We're going to be camping, we're going to be occupying, and we are here for the long haul.
And how many people are in your group?
Well, we have several, I would say about 20 homeowners within our group. That we have formed. Also, we have been informed that they're giving us a space in the Occupy LA newspaper where we're going to be able to present our thoughts, articles, and our events. Because again, this is across America where homeowners have been victimized.
So that was the first time we met, Carlos. Hi, Antonietta. Thank you for joining us. Let me just hide this here and switch to the screen format. Yeah. So, Carlos, what brought you to Occupy? Obviously, I asked you that then. What brought you to Occupy? I mean, did your opinions as the movement progressed, did they change at all? Did you feel like you accomplished something, or did you get momentum from being there in your activism, especially if you at the time you were really big on fighting foreclosures?
Well, there's a lot of great things that happened during the Occupy movement time. Prior to Occupy, no one was paying attention. The media didn't want to, listen to us. We had stories after stories of people losing their homes through illegal foreclosures, and it was a mess. But what the Occupy movement did, it changed the conversation. It helped change the conversation. When we were welcomed to the Occupy movement, when we set up our tent, it happened that our tent was set up right next to where all the media began to arrive. So I was the first person that people used to come and talk to, from the media. And we were able to articulate the issues that were affecting, countless of people, foreclosures. And we were able to put the blame where it belonged, on Wall Street, on the banks. So it was resonating. People start connecting the dots. So yes, the Occupy movement in itself helped change the conversation, putting the blame where the blame belonged, and that was on Wall Street, on the banks. They were fraudulently taking people's homes. They were stealing people's homes. And we were able, through the movement, to rise up in levels that I could never imagine. We had access to media. We had social media. We began to understand how to work these things in a way that it was helpful, and in a way that it was pretty much expanding our voice in areas that we never ever imagined possible. So from going into having weekly meetings in people's homes where a few people were listening, to going into the streets where we later on began to occupy people's homes and join not only national media but international media. Everybody was paying attention. Politicians began to be scared because they saw the mass amount of people that were getting involved and started to pay attention and starting to understand what the issues were and where we were putting the blame on. People began to understand how they were being screwed by Wall Street, how they were being taken advantage. They began to understand how corrupt the political world was, how they were protecting the banks, how were they protecting the wrongdoers. And we began to stand up for regular, average people. We were occupying homes of people that cannot defend themselves. And we saw the fraud on the paperwork. And again, occupying homes, organizing the entire community around them, gave us such a leverage against the banks that a lot of banks began to give the houses back to the people. We began to win. We began to flip the conversation, put it where it belonged. And now we had Wall Street on the defense. We have corrupt politicians explaining why they were taking so much money from the banks. And even up to this day, the effects of what happened during the Occupy movement are felt today because people woke up, because people began to challenge. We're doing sittings inside the banks. We're doing occupations inside the banks. Yes, it was a scary moment, but it needed to be so. It needed to happen because to that point, they controlled everything. They controlled the media. They control, again, politics. They had control literally everything, the court system. The only weapon that we had was to be able to take it to the streets and be able to unite together and fight back from that point.
Right, Carlos. And actually, so you mentioned that we were actually putting a lot of pressure on the banks at the time, and this was true. So I also want to play a clip, and this actually was after the evictions. The Occupy foreclosures group, post Occupy LA eviction, actually had an opportunity to meet with Wells Fargo, I believe. And so we also covered that. So I'm going to show a clip there and let the audience kind of experience how much power Occupy had at that time, and really show that it was a threat. So just give me a moment while I load this back up. And so basically, in this clip, I'm talking about some of the reflections of the occupiers who were in this meeting and what they felt was missing from the response from the bank.
Today's meeting with Wells Fargo was significant in regard to the settlement that has been going on between the attorney generals and these large banks. The occupiers have serious issues with Wells Fargo's treatment of homeowners and what they see as illegal foreclosures. A significant message that they put out in their press conference this evening was that the one thing that they noticed, despite all the figures and the grand presentation that Wells Fargo put out today, was that they lacked the humanity, that they could not feel a sense of remorse for what they had done to the homeowners, which again, occupiers and the Occupy movement overall feels has been a very great injustice, that there is a huge crime going on with the way that these foreclosures have been happening across the country. The state of California has the highest level of foreclosures, with 1 in 5 of foreclosures being in California alone. Last week, Occupy LA held a protest in front of Kamala Harris's state office in downtown Los Angeles to push her to continue to be stalwart in her opposition of this settlement.
We don't comply. We say occupy. Don't comply. We say occupy.
It's yet to be seen whether or not Kamala Harris will listen to their call, since it's been recently reported in many media outlets, including CNN and Reuters, AP, that it sounds like Kamala Harris is coming close to a deal with the White House and may very soon sign on to this Attorney General settlement. What is your response to the Attorney General possibly signing on?
Well, I hope she doesn't, because she has promised that any settlement that they have right now on the table is not good for Californians. So basically, she will be going against what she had previously said. I think the settlement is not good. I think that based on the crimes that the banks have committed against the nation, is basically pennies on the dollar. So I hope that she remains strong, that she doesn't waver, and that she follows suit alongside with the Attorney General from New York and file a lawsuit against these major banks.
This wraps up our report for tonight.
So, Carlos, I mean, how did you actually secure this meeting with the bank? I mean, this is not normal. Like, it's not every day that people who go out with tents and occupy a public space and have this national movement are able to find a way to get actually into the corporate offices and make their grievances. So how did this happen?
Well, it was a combination of things. We were putting a lot of pressure on Wells Fargo, and they were very scared because everywhere that they had an event, we will show up, and we will show up massively. I remember back in East LA, Wells Fargo was the sponsor of the East LA parade, which it draws thousands of people. And as they enter into the parade route, I remember us, entering.
Another day, another march.
Right. We're marching right along with them.
Sorry.
Embarrass them for the entire parade route. The next day they had to.
All right, Carlos, I think I lost you.
That's on all the papers to explain their position. So we were costing them a lot of money when we're doing the home occupations. And it was simple. We were asking to be able to come to the table and put our grievances before them. We want them to act responsibly. We're not asking for a lot. So through some maneuvering and some direct actions, we were able to secure a meeting with the top executives of Wells Fargo. Obviously, they didn't agree to what we were saying. They thought that they were doing God's work, as one of them put it. But we were able to rebuttal everything they say with facts, that they were committing serious crimes against the people. And this is why we were not too happy with Kamala Harris accepting any kind of deal, because it was going to be pretty much pennies on the dollar. I know that she secured the highest number of settlement deal for $26 billion. But when you compare it to the trillions of dollars that they committed in fraud, $26 billion was nothing. Most homeowners received $640 after they lost their homes through illegal foreclosures. How can that be justice? That's why we never agree to a settlement deal that then Attorney General Kamala Harris was agreeing to. We thought that it was smoke mirrors. We thought that it was a front for not going after the banks in the way that they should have went after. Someone should have went to jail from Wells Fargo. No one did. They were committing serious crimes. And even up to today, they continue to do so.
Yep, that's right. They do, and I think that's one of the important things to point out, in that the things that people were fighting for 10 years ago, we're still fighting for those same things. There was no action on the part of the government to rein in the failures of the banking system. If anything, thinking back on it and looking over some of these clips this morning, I realized that actually what the government did was protect the banks from the citizens, because they did everything in their power to dismantle the Occupy movement, especially when Occupy really was, I think, at a point in which it was about to really make really important changes in the system, because there was so much pressure on it. I mean, there were protests inside banks, and I also want to show a report that I did during Occupy that highlights one of the really big banking protests, where there were people setting up tents outside of Bank of America, and they literally rushed into the bank in the headquarters in downtown LA and set up tents inside. I mean, this was really powerful, what was happening at the peak of Occupy.
Yeah. And by the way,
go ahead.
Before you get into that, we have with us, which also was part of the Occupy movement, and she also was suffering and continues to suffer, by the banks, by the abuse of banks. So later on, we're going to have her say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Antonieta, for joining us. And also, we're hoping for a wonderful poetry reading too towards the end. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
But
I love that. I enjoyed and I was active as much as I could during the Occupy days with Occupy for fights for closures, and then also there by the Alcaldía of Los Angeles.
Awesome. So I'm going to play another clip really quick. I want to, for a few moments, because I want to highlight the type of protests that were happening at the time, at the peak of Occupy, where people were literally occupying banks. So let me go ahead and start this clip here.
Another day, another march. Today is November 9th, day 40 of Occupy Los Angeles, and you're watching Inside Out News.
So,
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? That's what I'm talking about. That's what we need to do. We need to say it in their face all the time. When the economy comes, it ain't for us. There's no more middle class. There's no more good jobs. There's nothing there. But it's the people that I just said earlier, when we pay their fair share of taxes, we wouldn't be in this mess that we're in right now. So the only way we can make this happen, we gotta get up, stand up, and fight. Fight! So can't take it no more. Can't take it no more. Can't take it no more. Can't take it no more.
Today was the Make the Banks Pay Not the Families and Students March. About 1,000 people gathered on California Plaza on 350 North Grand Avenue in downtown Los Angeles today. They marched over to the Bank of America corporate building where they set up camp. They set up two areas, one under a piece of artwork that's in the front pavilion, and they set up inside Bank of America several tents. The security locked the protesters inside the Bank of America. And police were refusing to allow employees into the bank. Many of the employees were upset with this. They were trying to get to their cars, they were trying to get to their offices, but the police refused to allow them inside of the bank. They told the employees that there were people inside committing a crime and therefore they could not enter. The group remained until about 6 o'clock. The march began at 3 p.m. About 50 of the occupiers from Occupy Los Angeles got together at 3 o'clock and marched over to join the other group at California Plaza, which included many members of unions, especially the SEIU. The protesters handed out some flyers.
I'm just gonna fast forward to show some of the interviews with the protesters, just to show you, just to kind of give you a perspective of why they were there and their rationale for being there.
Zombie, why are you guys occupying?
We're here to make the banks pay.
Same thing. How long are you guys gonna plan to stay in front of the Bank of America? Till we get
So
down.
it's over.
No, why are you gonna sleep here? Because I'm 99%. And how long do you think you guys are gonna be able to stay here before anything happens with the police? I'm speaking. ¿Cuánto tiempo piensas que vas a poder quedar aquí desde los policías? El indefinido. Hemos estado en Occupy Live por un mes, más de un mes, y seguiremos luchando hasta que ganemos. Camping here?
As long as we can.
And what's your name?
My name's Lori Brown.
Lori, do you have a tent set up?
I do have our tent set up. You like it?
Yes. Why are you guys camping out, occupying in front of the Bank of America corporate building?
Because we are trying to protect the social programs, public schools, and the higher education from getting cut because of the California state budget. If we hold big business, big banks, today we are here to force big banks to pay their fair share of taxes so we can create revenue for the state and save our programs that are detrimental to the state of California. For working families and families just in general. If we don't do it now, when?
As you may have noticed.
So, I mean, what do you think when you listen to these interviews, Carlos?
Well, it was really important to show the unity. We had unions that were coming out strong to occupy. We had all kinds of different organizations, religious groups that were joining in. The people were together and they were with one voice, sending one message, that they had enough of the rip-offs by Wall Street, how they were taking advantage of our communities, how very little they were putting back into the communities while taking so much from them, how they were abusing in so many different forms our communities and stealing from them. So people had enough. They saw that the poverty on the rise. Back in those days, 10 years ago, we saw the effects of people being evicted because people were becoming homeless. We were warning our city officials about it. Today, you have the results of what happened back then. The results of greed, the results of abuse, the results of corruption within government. That's what we are seeing on the streets today. We saw how politicians caved in and gave themselves to developers. These are the results that we are seeing today. Occupy movement was a voice of those that were sounding the alarm that the system was not working for the 99%. That's what the Occupy movement was saying, loud and clear. People were telling us to go get a job. Well, many people have 2 and 3 jobs already. It's not about us not wanting to work. It was about a system that was broken, that was leaving so many people behind and continues to do so today.
Absolutely. Antonietta, would you like to add anything to that?
Sí, quisiera decir, mira, las cosas que yo necesito decir, necesito hacerlas llegar a la comunidad en español, porque hay una desconexión mientras la comunidad latina
Let
en
me
los
tra-
Estados Unidos.
let me translate
eh,
as you say that. Let me
Ujú,
translate because we do
sí,
have a English audience. So she's saying right now that the things that she wants to say, she wants to also say it in Spanish because there's a disconnect. Go ahead.
yes, sí, hay una desconexión en cuanto la experiencia de lo que nos está ocurriendo y para el momento en que se traduce, ya ha pasado un tiempo que es muy vital y es muy esencial. Entonces,
So there,
yo he pasado por ese sufrimiento.
right. So there is a
Ujú.
disconnect between what is happening at the moment, that it needs that attention, the vital attention at the moment, and it's not happening. And this is why it is very critical to pay
Sí,
attention at the
ujú.
moment.
Sí, por eso hay esa desconexión. Entonces, I'm going to try to explain it now in English because I lived in a world that is in two languages, and it seems like the one in English walks at the pace of a turtle. It's slow because we are experiencing every day what's going on. We're seeing and sounding the alarms in the Latino community. A mother that works 3 jobs and has no food for her children, no way of giving them education, the housing insecurity, food insecurity, all that we're starting to see it at the beginning of the 21st century. We started to see it, and only war around us, and everything was crumbling. And then we started experiencing the war at a very low level. And I tell you, the war declared on the American people was the war economic. And that's what happened. And we had to do something. Occupy was the answer to that. We were la trinchera, la primera línea. And we went all over the community saying we have to do something. We have to stop what's going on. And Occupy, I feel to this day, was the answer to that disconnection. We were seeing everything that was crumbling, and we probably didn't know that it was going to take years, because it takes years to dismantle such a system, or for the system to show that it's not working. So it finally showed definite symptoms of imploding. And we felt it on the table, we felt it on the roofs or the lack of. We felt it in the ways that a soldier will feel the war at a battle camp. And when we were in our homes, we were with all this sense of security, but we realized that sense of security was false, because what was happening and the homes and the streets was definitely, a new kind of war. And that kind of war came in the form of corporations, pharma giving us all kinds of medicines that were making us sick and with cancers. And if it was the food, it was giving us all kinds of sickness and obesity and degrees of carcinogens and all kinds of things, transgenics, um, and that has been war against us, and we haven't felt it. It kind of took so long for us to realize that we're in the middle of a battlefield, and the only one thing we had to was the government saying it's there to protect us, but then we see a big dysfunction, and that war working for the rich and leaving the rest, to kill themselves over crumbs.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Antonietta. You make some very, very good points. And I wanted to show, while you were speaking, some of those photos from Occupy to kind of highlight that many of the people who were suffering the most were, especially from the foreclosures, were people of color, Spanish-speaking families. Carlos, you work so much with these groups. In some of the photos that I showed, you can see that these were clearly Hispanic families who were being targeted by the banks.
Correct. And what was happening is what we saw was abuses by all the major bank institutions here in the United States and some from other countries, including Deutsche Bank from Germany. We saw them abusing criminally, intentionally, directively taking people's homes in ways that was considered, many people consider this the crime of the century because it was being done through the courts. It was being done openly. And the massive amount of evidence that we had was being ignored by the highest levels of of um, of government, of our law enforcement institutions and agencies, by again the Attorney General of the United States. They had the evidence of the high crimes that the banks were committing, the targeting of black and brown communities to steal their wealth. When we talk about the amount of foreclosures that took place, if we look at the numbers, the vast majority of those that were being foreclosed were people of color. The ones that were being targeted with predatory loans were people of color. They took high advantage of the fact that these are working class, that these are people that already are struggling every day of their lives trying to put food on their table. They need their jobs. They cannot afford to take time off to go to the court or to hire fancy lawyers. This is what was happening. The Occupy movement brought voice to these people. When we were occupying homes, I remember, we're running 3 and 4 meetings a week, with homeowners that were at risk of losing their homes. And the places in downtown where we're holding the meetings, they used to get packed with homeowners. And when you look at their faces, I would say that 95% of those people were people of color. That tells me a lot. That told us a lot. But we were representing anyone. It didn't matter what color your skin was. We were out there representing the people. Didn't matter, what neighborhood you came from or what political party you belonged to or what your religion was. Everybody was being targeted because money, when it comes to the greed of the banks, they're colorblind. They'll take from whoever, but they will definitely take advantage of those that will fight the least,
Right.
including seniors. Our seniors were being thrown out to the streets, illegally being taken. Their homes were being taken. I remember a 93-year-old woman. Someone took out a loan for $700,000. The banks didn't care to investigate. They wanted to throw it out of the streets. Occupy movement had to come in. A lot of our great activists. I remember Susan O'Keefe. She worked tirelessly to be able to save this woman's home. And many of our activists that were coming out, there was dedicated people from Occupy that were fighting for people, that were fighting for their homes. It was not fun to be able to occupy a home because we would take a lot of criticism from a lot of people that would tell us to go get a job, that didn't understand because they were okay. They were not losing their homes. So they didn't understand what we were doing. We had to educate them. It wasn't easy, Margaret. It was a
No.
hard thing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we
Absolutely. And Antonietta, go ahead really quick.
Yes, I am a living witness of that process because I suffered. I lost my home that I have gotten with my ex-husband, Rafael, who died in January this year. And that was 2006 to 2008. They gave us a predatory loan on his home, my home, and the new home that we bought as newly married. They led us through the whole process, and I remember everything because to this day I suffer PTSD because of that. I haven't been able to go forward from that point because I never recuperate the trust in the system. And I remember that when the banks got the bailout, we say, oh, finally, something is going to be done. But the banks got the bailout, and I heard that Carlos said $600. We got $300, and at the end, we had to split 150 and 150. All we got was a paper from the Bank of America and Countrywide saying that yes, they had definitely found evidence, strong evidence that there was a data breach aimed at taking the houses with these complicated loans from Afro Americans and Latinos. It says there in the paper, and we were going to do a class action. I never heard of that because to save my home and Rafael saved his home, we have to lose the home that we got, which they extracted the equity from the two houses and put us in 3 predatory loans. In 2 years, we didn't even have money to eat, or we couldn't even, it destroyed us completely. And the worst part was that to save the home, in order to save the home, and this, we can consider ourselves lucky because most people only had one home. And what we had to do was pay this insane amount of money to save the home, bring the loan to like almost double to be able to get from the predatory loan. And they made us sign papers when we cashed that check that we were not going to pursue anything against the banks. That was the bailout that was given. I knew I was so angry. I wanted to rip that stupid check, because on top of the destruction, there was the insult. And it's to this day, every time that comes up, is I'm relieving the whole thing. It just goes in front of my eyes, step by step, and and it has taken me years to even get better. But I get not better because that never, there was no justice. It was as if never happened. And I can't believe to this day that now I'm in the same position, because with the proroga that they gave us for the pandemia is ending, and I'm like afraid that the bank is going to come up and tell me, okay, now you have to start paying, and we're going to do this. And I'm just like bracing myself, because I feel that maybe now is going to be the final blow. And I'm wondering, what is the president and the vice president going to do? I remember that that la vicepresidenta was the attorney general in 2006 and 2008. So I'm asking her, please, what are you going to do? It has to be some solution that is going to be taken into account what happened in 2006, because part of that, it has the effects, the ripple effects all the way here. We need some justice and some closure in that theme of the bailout that was given to the banks back then, because it was only putting like not even like a little cream over, but we left, we were left on the, on the battlefield, I feel. So they still had to pick us up and help us to finally close this chapter and make capitalism work for the most people, because capitalism is only working for the corporations, the big corporations and the big rich people, that they know how to take advantage of all the subsidies and all of that, multi-million subsidies. We're only asking for the dignity of a home and putting food on the table and having education for our children. We were able to do that in the past. Now I see, beautiful white people with blue eyes in the corners, a woman with a child. You see a Latino selling flowers or mangoes or naranjas, working, rebuscándose la vida. But now I see veterans from that war, in the ranks of all kinds of people, from Americans born here. And I don't understand that, because I came from Latin America here to work and make a better world for everybody and my family. And we always worked our way, and we don't understand why the richest country in the world is not able to provide for the base. We are the base, and we need closure, not foreclosure. We need closure to the war against us.
Right.
And we need justice.
Absolutely, we do. And I want to touch on some of the things that you talked about, because you hit some very important points about the way our economy works. So first of all, what happened during that time that led up to these foreclosures was that the United States government was putting pressure on the banks to give out loans to more people of color. The banks interpreted this, and the loan writers interpreted this as to mean, well, we'll give out subprime loans, which means that you technically, this particular group doesn't really qualify, so we give them these subprime loans with these high variable interests. So they took advantage of the situation. And sometimes when you hear this narrative, even now in the news or commentators, they often try to blame the people themselves for this. Well, you took out a subprime loan. Well, why didn't you know that this was tied to to a percent that would change? And yes, Antonita?
Margot, the subprime loan is a figure that is very complicated. It's only good for the flippers. Who are behind the flippers? The ones that take, oh, I buy your home, you're selling a home, I'll buy your home, I'll give you cash or whatever. Big corporations are behind that. This is whole. So they take a home from a struggling homeowner, and then they make big money very fast. A subprime is forbidden for regular folk like that. It wasn't my first refinance. I had done 2 refinances, and I saw people also refinancing to get a new kitchen or get a roof, and they lost the home because they were given a loan that was designed to take their home. So don't believe that the subprime thing, it was by design. It was
Absolutely.
by design what they did.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying often you hear that they put the blame back on the government because they're saying that they were pressured to give loans to people who weren't qualified. But that's the excuse that they give. They purposely gave people, certain groups of people, very bad loan agreements, which put them into
and I tell you another thing. It happened to us because it happened to me. They told me, oh, but you signed the papers. Oh, but you did this. They blamed me. I felt violated. I felt like that child that is abused, and then they tell her, oh, see, you've been wearing your clothes too tight. You put yourself out there to be abused by the predator, by the pederast. No. On top of that, when they told me that, look, it made me this tiny, and I was left with no words at that moment, because it was the biggest blow. I was feeling guilty that I have signed the paper. I was led into that. That wasn't supposed to happen, and it did. You will never imagine that these big people that you always trusted and the banks and that will allow such a violation, such an attack in the most sacred thing that is like, it's not the house, it's your home, it's your place where you thrive, where you dream, where you have your children. And no.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. But my main point is just to kind of give an overview of what was happening, what they were using as excuses, and you have firsthand experience with those excuses. They tried to blame you, they tried to blame others, and even today you can still hear this narrative on certain news networks or certain discussions amongst pundits who talk about this. They still blame they blame the government, they blame the people who took the loans instead of putting the blame on themselves, right? The banks are responsible. They did this. They knew what they were doing, just like with when they bundled up all of these bad mortgages and turn them into derivatives. I mean, they knew what they were doing. They wanted to take as much risk as possible. They over leveraged themselves so much in the name of money. And the problem is that, you're talking about people used to be able to get educated. People used to be able to get a good job. They could have a pension. They could retire. Well, we don't have that anymore because there's something that changed in our economy. We used to be an industrial capitalist society, and now we are a
Yeah, but look
financial
what happened to all the
society.
jobs. All the
Yeah, well,
jobs
that's what
were
I'm trying
taken
to say,
out.
Antonieta. That's what I'm trying to say, is that there is a reason why the jobs are bad now. There's a reason why all of this is happening. It's because of the structure of capitalism has changed. It is no longer about production. It's not as profitable to be in industry. So they exported all of the production out of the country, and now our economy is strictly based on finance. So it's strictly an economy in which you make money off of other people without doing any work. And so that's
Margot,
what they
our economy now, see, the pyramid is inverted because essential workers should be paid more. Essential. See, in our tribes, I am from Colombia, from the Amazon tribe called Muisca people. So the Muisca people have this very clear. We are organized by small networks of tribes united to a big cause. We don't sell, we don't privatize the river, the earth, the resources. They are for the common of the well-being of the people, the pueblos, the tribes. And we use two. One is trueque, which is the exchange of things. In that way, I can exchange gold and emeralds or coca leaves with other tribes for salt, mantas, and pottery, So, and the other one, which is the most important one, and the one that the conquistadores decided to leave out of the picture. They took only the trueque. The most important one is tequio, which is the exchange of services. And that takes into account the human capital and is the most important and is backed by your word. So we know this in the primordial and we call them primitive, but they're actually the most advanced because we come from a woman called Bachue. Is not, my grandmother used to say Bachue is not the first woman. It's not like Eve. Bachue is the last woman of a previous civilization that, because doing all these self-destructive, suicidal things, big, huge things, it got to the end. So there was one woman left, and she reinitiated the human species again, Bachue. But it was not the first woman, it was the last woman of a previous civilization. And she used to say, these are not legends, these are our prehistory. And we only had at one point the stories that we hear from back thousands of years back. So tequio is the exchange of services. Now with the pandemic, now we have the experience of the pandemic, and we have realized, oh my God, who's bringing a tomato, the avocado, this to the table? And we start seeing back the whole line, all the way to the people in the countryside. And we see the disconnection. And I remember that back when the transgenics, this whole thing with Monsanto, one of those groups of scientists that did all the experiments with the rats, and they realized all these rats are coming up with these huge tumors and all these new cancers and all this.
Yeah,
And
Antonieta,
they
I
was
just want to
asked,
say just a
what was
moment.
that? Yeah.
I just
But
want to
let me finish this.
go
Let
and
me
finish
just
your
finish
thought.
this. yeah. Then he said the well, what is going to happen because of the transgenics is stronger viruses. And he said that in 2015, stronger viruses. And I always wonder, well, okay, the connection between what we eat is very real as the connection between, all of these banks and corporations taking little by little, everything.
Right, and some of what you're describing is, what Marx described as the fetishization of commodities, where you have a disconnect between the value of the labor behind the commodity itself. And but my point is in all of this is that the reason Occupy didn't just happen just because was birthed out of nowhere. These the issues with the mortgages, subprime mortgages, these predatory loans, people ending up on the street without a house, a home to live in. That's because it's built into the way our economy works now. It's all about extracting wealth. It is not about what you're talking about, the tying of the labor to the product itself and knowing the value based off of the labor, because we don't really even have a strong productive industry anymore. So my point is to just say that we need to see the big picture, because we need to understand how to make the system work for us. And in order to do that, we have to know how the system works. And this is how the system works. And it's really the banks, the financiers, who are in charge. And that's why Occupy had to fail in the short term, because the government is beholden to these banks. I mean, the Obama administration had so many people from the banking industry in his own administration, from J.P. Morgan Chase, Lehman Brothers, other banks, some of the other big banks. They were all part of his administration. They were working at the Federal Reserve and in the Treasury. And so this was an operation against people who finally were so fed up, and the government was complicit in this moment. Carlos.
Yeah, including then Attorney General Eric Holder. He was an attorney that represented Wall Street prior to becoming an attorney general. After retiring or going back to private life, he went back to Wall Street. So that speaks volumes of a system that is not working for us, because the same players that are taking advantage of the people are the same players that are running Washington, and are the same players that after they finish in Washington, they'll go back to what they were doing before, representing Wall Street, representing the big banks, representing corporations. So I understand what our friend is telling us here today, Antonieta. We understand that labor has a lot to do with this, but we're talking about a system that is broken. Just recently, we saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez being invited to an event that is very exclusive to the 1%. And she sent out a message that should resonate with all of us, that all of us should be understanding of that message, because the 1% are not paying their fair share, and we need to tax the rich. We have a system that is literally being financed on the shoulders of the working class, while the 1% are putting their money in their pet projects, going to space and creating their own city somewhere, away from everybody else, or coming out with their own little toys, expensive toys, while the rest of the population are suffering and in poverty. So we need to, as markets say, we need to see the big picture. And the big picture is pretty much the system that we have right now is not working for the 99%. That was the message back during the days of Occupy. That is the message today. Still not working. It's not cool that people have to live on the streets. It's not cool that people have to pay all their earnings to a landlord. It's not cool that our young people are in debt, with their student loans for the rest of their lives. It is not cool for people have to struggle, just to bring food to the table because the cost of living is so expensive now that they have to make choices between putting gas on their car or having to buy food, for their children. It is not cool that we are seeing, transportation, the cost of transportation on the rise. It's not cool that none of these things that are within the system are not working for us. We need better systems. And this is why the struggle continues, even after Occupy.
Yeah, and even the climate movement itself, they don't realize it yet. They're starting to, because I did see a protest in England where they actually attempted to occupy some banks. And the whole climate movement needs to understand that they are also connected to this, because this finance system that we live in is it doesn't care what it eats up. The environment, it doesn't care about the environment. All it cares is to just generate wealth without actually doing any type of real production. So in 2007, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, led in 2008, led to the recession, 2009, and the government under Obama, they did something. The Federal Reserve instituted quantitative easing. Well, that quantitative easing, first of all, that in the bailouts, the TARP bailouts, like, that benefited the fossil fuel industry. The Federal Reserve and the government propped up the fossil fuel industry. Not a single dollar went to green energy initiatives or renewable energy or to fight climate change. All of that, any of that money that went towards the energy sector went to fossil fuels. And even now in 2020, 9% of the Federal Reserve's corporate bond balance is from the energy sector, and all of it is fossil fuel related. They're not putting any money, they're not investing money into stopping climate change. So, and the banks are complicit in giving loans to these fossil fuel companies. They should be allowed to die, face the death that they should have faced a long time ago, and allowed this new, innovative, better for the planet technology to come about. And they haven't. They've been propping up an industry that is destroying our planet. So the climate movement really wants to see something happen where we actually stop CO2 emissions and we actually keep the planet from getting any warmer, it needs to put its focus square on the finance system. It needs to occupy banks. It needs to go after them. It needs to go after their central banks because they're also part of the problem. And that's where the pressure needs to be if we really want to see change. It's the same fight that we were fighting 10 years ago. All of the issues all stem back to the way the economy works. And it's a finance capitalist economy. And that kind of economy has no care for workers because it doesn't need them. And that's the point.
Maybe at this time would be nice to have Antonieta give us a poem.
Yeah.
No, we way past the hour.
Yeah, we're a little bit over time.
Yes. I want to do this. I am the house in a dream. I have never dreamed of a house with wings. A house that flies from a dream makes you homeless. The river-like house in my dream makes a tomorrow. The house on my shoulder carries me along the road. My homeless heart wanders the razor-sharp night. I carry a house on a dream made up of today. I am the homeless house on the street. I have a dream that turns into nightmare. A house of water in my dream cools my thirst. A house of fresh air in my dream dries my tears of outrage. A house of earth in my dream needs a key to enter. A house of fire in my dream needs reparations. I have a house dream called jail for the banker. I am the house in a dream for your dream and my dream. Debt free, mortgage free, predatory loan free. Bankers in custody, break up the oligarchy, retake our democracy for your dream and my dream.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Antonieta. Thank you so much. That was really,
Thank you.
really powerful.
We we are out of time, and I just want to say thank you for this message today, Mark and Antonieta, because the Occupy movement uh, took a very uh, part of history, and it drove a message that put squarely Wall Street on the responsible institutions that have taken so much from the people. The struggle will continue for days to come, for months to come, for years to come. But right now, what we need to do is focus our attention in the things that are in front of us. We
The
learn,
solution.
but we organize for the future. And that needs to happen now. We cannot wait. We cannot be discouraged. We have shown that if we come together, if we work together, if we focus, we can overcome. And that's what we're striving to do now at this moment in life.
Yeah, and I want to give a little bit advice to future protesters and occupiers on strategy, and that's the surprise occupations that happened at banks were probably the most effective ones. I think you should continue to protest and occupy, but don't stay in one location for too long. Because if you stay in one location for too long, you're going to have to face a lot of social issues that are part of American society, and that's what happened to occupiers. They were forced to deal with social services for the unhoused. That was not part of the original plan. They embraced it and they took it on. They provided free medical services and so on. It was powerful to see a new sort of society being built like that from the ground up. But it's going to take away from your main goals. And so you want to move from one place to another, do surprise occupations and keep them going, keep filling up the ranks. Like go to different bank locations, go to symbolic places. Just don't stay there for too long. And just remember that we're still fighting the same issues with the banks. That it's really the banking system that is a problem, and that the finance system has overtaken our economy and our government and society. So please keep fighting. Don't give up. We should see something like this merge with the climate movement now, because these are the kind of tactics that I think will help. So I'm hoping that as the pandemic gets a little bit better, that we can see more of these actions happen, because we need them. They were working. That's why they shut down Occupy. That's why the governments shut down Occupy. And they'll use also, by the way, they use the unhoused to shut down Occupy. So that's why I say don't stay in one place too long. Okay, well, thank you so much to our guest, Antonieta, and thank you for that powerful
Thank you.
poetry.
Viva el Partido Mundial de los Indignados.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And thank you to our viewers for staying. We went over time, but this was a real special edition, the Occupy edition. So please remember to occupy. And also, if it's all right, I wrote a piece about Occupy, and I'm just gonna show it really quick here. So if anybody is interested in reading my thoughts on the Occupy movement, it's on braveneweurope.com, and you can read my thoughts and assessment of what happened and the effects of Occupy, because we really didn't get too much into that. We had like way too much to talk about with the all the injustices, but Occupy had a major effect on the political climate, and Bernie Sanders and all the squad, all of that could not have happened without Occupy, talking about the 99% versus the 1%. So any final thoughts, Carlos, Antonieta, because we are definitely out of time. We're good?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you, everybody. I don't want to take more of the time that you've given us, but stay strong, stay united, stay focused, keep fighting, because the best is yet to come for us. We're going to make it when we stand together. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you, Carlos. And you're right. We need to focus on the solutions. We are the solution. The people is the solution, and we're ready to work and cultivate the solutions. It's just let's get to work and let's occupy everything.
Absolutely. Occupy everything. I like that. All right. Well, thank you to our audience. Thank you so much for staying with us for nearly an hour and a half. You've been watching Stand Up Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. I'm your co-host, Margot Paez, and over here, that's Carlos Marroquin, our co-host. He's an amazing grassroots organizer, and we'll be back.
Viva Bernie Sanders Brigade.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be back next week, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, with more exciting things to report, more amazing guests. So please stay with us, share us with your friends, hit subscribe, hit the follow button. We're on the Bernie Sanders Brigade page on Facebook, and also on YouTube at Insight Out News. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Have a wonderful week, and take good care of yourself. This is Margot Paez for Stand Up Fight Back. Goodbye.